All right, everyone. Today I wanted to go over some helpful information for folks who did not start Lost Ark on day one of Global. And I think it's really easy, especially for folks like me, to forget about that not everybody started on day one. Not everybody started with the head start. There's plenty of people who are actually just starting right now. And that's why I wanted to give out 10 helpful tips for those of you guys who did not start on day one, who are starting a bit late, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, starting late is going to kind of give you the advantage in some sense with some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into these 10 tips here, and let's start off with number one, and this is definitely a bit of an advantage that you have as somebody starting a bit late compared to a lot of people who started on day one, and that is I would not worry nearly as much for somebody who is newer to Lost Ark, who is starting late, to rush especially their item levels as much. Now, it's definitely understandable for those of us who started early. You want to kind of stay in the upper echelon of players, both in terms of competitiveness, but also it gives you a big market advantage because you were kind of in that first group of people who are able to end up selling stuff on the market and the auction house, and especially catering to the whales. You can end up selling certain things for massively inflated prices that obviously you only really get that advantage if you're in that first group of people to access that content. But if you're starting late, you don't have to worry about that. That gives a lot of pressure kind of away from you. It takes a lot of pressure away, not having to feel like you need to kind of keep up in that sense as much. And it allows you to work on a lot of other very, very important content in the game. So still work on your item levels, of course, still, work on your vertical progression. But as somebody who's starting later, you can really work on very much needed and very important horizontal progress, a lot more so than people who started earlier on. And you'll find that a lot of people, especially folks like me who started on day one, you're going to see like my horizontal progress in this game is absolutely shameful. I have like virtually no Makoko seeds. My collectibles are all in really rough shape. And this is something as a newer player who didn't start on day one, you can kind of work on and give yourself an advantage on that a lot of people earlier on weren't able to. So that's the first one right there. Now, number two here. This is something that I highly recommend to people who are really into alts. And I highly recommend if you're newer to Lost Ark and you do like making multiple characters, trust me, they're going to have plenty of opportunities to make as many characters as you want to. On your first character, though, I highly recommend that you get to level 50 and you get to Vern and you end up getting your 2 free Vern power passes. The reason why I say that is because these are going to then allow you to end up taking 2 alts up to level 50. They'll get you to that same point in the Vern storyline. And if you end up making an alt before you get to this point, you're going to have to go back through and level up, 1 to 50 again. You're going to have to do the main story again. And I'll tell you that once you end up getting to that point in the story and you get your Vern power passes, you'll also be able to unlock knowledge transfer in your stronghold. And you never have to worry about leveling 1 to 50 ever again if you don't want to. So I highly recommend you get to that point first before you branch out and make alts. But of course, as I get into more of these tips here, you'll see that making alts is still going to be very important and definitely something as a newer player you're going to want to get to, but just work on that first character first until you get those power passes. All right, number 3, talking about alts here. Once you end up getting your Vern power passes and you end up unlocking the knowledge transfer feature in your stronghold, and just so you guys can get a sense of what this ends up looking like here, if we end up going to management, you'll unlock this knowledge transfer. This will allow you to end up taking additional characters up to level 50 without having to do the main story. You get those 2 power passes, so that lets you do it for free. These ones end up costing 600 gold each, which is very well worth it. Once you get to that point, I highly recommend actually you take a step back and make your alts. At least any characters that you are thinking about making, just start making them now. Even if you don't actually play them or plan on playing them, just kind of work on them and get them made. And the reason why I say that is because, especially right now, getting from tier 1 to tier 2 is actually getting easier and easier, especially if you end up taking a look at the market and you see the prices of honing materials. Like tier 1 Guardian Stones are actually down to 1 gold per 10 right now. And this is the first time I've kind of seen them stable at this price. You can see average daily price is 1.5 for a bundle of 10. Even the weapon stones are 2.9 for a bundle of 10, which is really, really cheap. So the main thing that you need to worry about is just getting the Harmony Shards and the Harmony Leap Stones. So make your alts and even if they just sit around, you'll be able to accumulate some rest bonus for your Chaos Dungeons. And if you only end up doing one thing on those alts, is do your Chaos Dungeons, because that's going to both give you Harmony Shards and Harmony Leap Stones. And while working on your main character, you'll get plenty of gold to end up getting enough of these materials, because they're so cheap now. When the game first came out, these materials were way, way more expensive. So kind of the strategy and the approach to like working on your alts and taking them from tier 1 to tier 2 was a bit different. But you'll end up having plenty of gold to end up affording these materials, any extras that you need to take your alts up to tier 2. The big thing is making sure that you make them and you start working on your Chaos Dungeons so you get enough of those Harmony Shards and Harmony Leap Stones to work on your alts. So that's going to be number 3 right there. Number 4 here, islands. Very, very big one, and this is such a big topic that I'm not going to get too much more into it. I have plenty of videos out there already on the channel talking about islands and all the resources, but don't forget about them. If you're newer to Lost Ark and you're starting, if you're struggling on your character going from tier 1 to tier 2 and then tier 2 to tier 3, there are so many different islands in the game. They're going to be all over, and on my channel you can find several guides about islands. On other channels you can find more information about all the different islands all over the internet, but this is definitely something you want to utilize, take to your advantage, because they're going to give you an insane amount of materials to go from tier 1 to tier 2 and tier 2 to tier 3. Just keep in mind that islands are once per roster, so make sure that you have a pretty good idea of what character you want to end up using those materials on, and when you end up getting the actual materials, open them up on that character that you feel committed that you want to work on taking from tier 1 to tier 2 and tier 2 to tier 3, because you won't be able to do the islands for those materials again on alts. It's once per roster. All right, number 5. This is another really big one that I think a lot of people make a mistake on, sadly, and I'll put some emphasis on it. But while you are working on tier 1 and tier 2, when you're still in the tier 1 gear bracket and the tier 2 gear bracket, please avoid overpaying for everything on the auction house, because you can almost think of it. In fact, the developers of the game even kind of admitted this in one of their recent dev blogs, that like tier 1 and tier 2 are kind of just like a tutorial for the game. Basically, you're going to move past them relatively quickly, and tier 3 is really the end game, and tier 1 and tier 2 equipments are going to take a massive penalty once you move on to a higher tier. So don't get too carried away buying expensive gear, ability stones, accessories in tier 1 and tier 2. It's okay if you have to, if you end up buying a couple, as long as you don't end up spending a lot of gold on them, because it's really tier 3 where that's going to be the equipment and the resources that you end up using the most there. So don't overpay for tier 1 and tier 2 gear, ability stones, accessories, all that sort of stuff. All right, now let's move on to number 6. Now, this one I recommend here because a lot of people, this one is actually kind of applies to everyone, even if you're not, starting Lost Ark new. Even if you played on day 1, I still recommend this one to everyone here. That is, don't immediately end up opening up your resource bags. I would avoid opening them up until you absolutely need them, and especially if you're newer and you just did all those islands and you end up getting more resource bags, like especially with like the pirate coin chests here. When you're newer, you're not going to have a lot of the information about the game that you're going to have later on, and this was a mistake that I made. I opened up a bunch of these for Sun Coins, and then I converted the Sun Coins to pirate coins. Without really knowing too much more about pirate coins, that might seem like a good deal because Sun Coins actually end up giving you the most pirate coins. If you compare like turning in Guyana's or Skeptrum's coins for pirate coins, it gives you a worse ratio, but still it's really not worth it. So don't end up opening these until you absolutely have to, and make sure that you open them up on the character that you actually need the resources, because a lot of these chests are bound to roster, but once you end up actually getting the resources, they're going to be bound to character. So just be mindful of which character you end up opening these up on as well. All right, number 7. This is a really easy one, and one that I highly recommend to anybody who is newer starting out in Lost Ark, and that is, if you have to buy one thing from the Mari shop and one thing only, I highly recommend that you start buying these right here, these healing battle item chests. There's a lot to get into, and I have other videos on the channel talking about Mari Shop and all that sort of stuff, but this is definitely worth it. So if you're new, start buying these up. You are absolutely going to use them later on, especially when you get to like Guardian raids and Abyss dungeons and whatnot. And if you're wondering, like, wait a second, this costs real money? No, it doesn't. These are blue crystals, and you can end up converting gold to blue crystals with your exchange. and these chests only cost 25 blue crystals. It is absolutely worth it. Probably, again, if I had to pick one thing in the Mari shop, like as a catch-all, this is the one thing that you should be buying. That's the item that I pick right there. So newer to the game, start buying those, at least a few of them, so that you have them once you start getting to your Guardian raids and your Abyss dungeons. Number 8 here. Don't ignore your strongholds. This is a big one, and this is a mistake that I made, because once you actually get to the stronghold, there's like a lot of information that the game throws at you. There's a lot of tutorials and just stuff, and it's very confusing. Like, it's a whole big system. Don't ignore it. Start learning it, start figuring it out a bit, and put this action energy to use as well. You should never really be maxed out, because that's just kind of a waste of resources there, but just start to slowly figure out the stronghold system, because it's definitely something that you're going to use at endgame quite a bit. So don't neglect it like I did. Learn it as soon as you can, or at least start to learn it when you can. Number 9. This is similarly, speaking of don't max out your action energy, same with trade skills. I think around level 30 or so, the game is going to end up giving you a tutorial on trade skills, and it's going to end up unlocking your trade skill or your work energy here. In fact, this is a perfect example of what you should not do right here. Once you end up unlocking trade skills, learn a little bit about it, figure it out a little bit. You don't have to spend too much time on it, but just use some of this work energy here so that you're not sitting at 10,000, so you're not maxed out, because this is just a waste of a resource. This regenerates over time, every 10 minutes here, and so if you just completely neglect this, like you neglect your stronghold, and you keep it maxed out, you're just wasting out on the possibility to end up regenerating this resource that the game could give you. So I recommend that you spend at least a little bit of time on it, even if you don't get too into it, just to burn some of this work energy here and then get back to it a little later. And number 10, of course, a really, really big one. Have fun. Enjoy the game, guys. Obviously, that's the most important thing. And especially if you look at just a lot of videos and guides and whatnot, sometimes it's very easy to just kind of get in the habit of trying to min-max stuff and micromanage too many systems, and just, you know, you get too focused on just maximizing the game as much as you can, and you forget about the original purpose, which is to just have fun and enjoy playing. Because Lost Ark is a great game. There's a lot of different content. There's a lot of stuff to do. Even if it's not just pushing item levels, there's so much other content. Islands, collectibles, rapport. There's just so much out there. Rapport. I know I didn't say it right earlier, so my bad. There's a lot to do, and enjoy the game for everybody. This tip kind of applies to everyone as well, but have fun playing the game, because it really is a great game, and that's where I'm going to leave off this video. So I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, consider leaving a quick like, consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this in the future, and feel free to check out the Twitch stream, twitch.tv/salt, where I'll be streaming Lost Ark as well as other games. Thanks again, everyone. Take care, and until next time.